Good morning, everybody. Drop a comment if you can hear me. And also just say what's up. I'm live. It says there's 6 viewers. I think one of them is technically me. 6 viewers. I think one of Oh, yep. Okay. Now 5, 4. Okay. Like I said, I'm new to this, so I don't know how this is gonna go. Yeah, I have a bunch of questions that I compiled from Patreon, and I'm gonna go through those. I'm actually gonna reorganize them a little bit right now. So as people get in, give a few minutes to also let me know if you can hear me. Good. Essa, I think that's how you say your name. I'm not exactly sure. Essa, you let me know. See, right now it says there's no viewers, but then you dropped a comment, so I'm confused. I don't know how this is working. Okay. Yeah, you guys should be able to chat, but you won't be able to talk. So it's all in the chat box. Like I said, if you guys have any questions, then drop them, comment, and I'll answer them directly. Like I said, I compiled most of the questions that were asked to me on my Patreon over the past month and a half. And the plan is to just kind of run through those and uh, explain as much as I can. And you guys can ask more direct questions as I'm explaining. And that way you get more direct answers. So I guess we're going to see how that goes. If you guys are just joining in, like I said, I'm gonna give another few minutes. It's 10:04. I've been live for 2.5 minutes. So there's 3 people. I don't know. Doesn't matter. So just gonna hold on for a sec. Let more people join in. While I'm doing that, I'm going to organize the questions that I have so I can kind of split them up between technique and training. So that goes there. Okay. Okay, so the question is, do you guys want to talk about technique or training first? Comment and let me know, technique or training. I think there's much more training questions. That being said, I did just release that program 6 overview. So, and I think I answered probably a good portion of them there, but now is an opportunity to kind of talk about them more in depth, I suppose. Let me see. Asa says technique first. Honestly, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to let this go public. Okay. I'm going to let the random people join in just so they can listen, just so I can get more people, just so I can chat, let's see how it goes. Okay. So, all right. So technique first, which is good. Like I said, there's more training questions. I'm just reorganizing really quickly. My computer is being quite finicky. Here we go. Copy, paste. And then, okay. think that's might be the last one right there. So, all right. So, I guess we're just gonna get to it then. All right. Excuse me. Take a sip of water. All right. So, talk about technique first. Like I said, there are only 3 questions that were kind of asked to me during the past month and a half or so regarding technique. I know the training log is, and even the training recaps, the throwing recaps, they kind of illuminate you guys a little bit about um, what I'm working on and what I'm working towards, and some ideas that I have in my head regarding cues and stuff like that. And there's only been a few questions, and if you guys watch my um, throwing program recaps that I post on YouTube, the public stuff, I've recently said that I've kind of been redeveloping my technical model, and I can talk through that right now. I think that's what I'd like to do, just so that you guys have an idea of what I've been working on a little bit more specifically. Um, so, uh, yes, the very first question that I had regarding technique, and this is, I guess I need to zoom out a little bit and talk about where I'm at in training exactly. Um, so I've started working with a new technical coach just about at the start of January. Currently, I have like a 2 coach setup where I have what I would call like a head coach or a manager. His name is Sean Donnelly. He's the throws coach at UCLA. One of my best friends. I've known him for as long as I've been throwing. So we've been good friends for about 11 years now, and he's kind of my head coach. He helps me direct my training. He helps me plan training out. He helps me make all the big decisions that go into my training. One of those things being, he suggested that I go see this guy, Sean McGinley. So there's 3 Seans working together here. And so he suggested that I go see this Sean McGinley guy and get his take on technique, because he's talked with him a little bit and said it might be worthwhile. I've also met Sean McGinley as well, and he's an interesting guy. So I decided, it's only an hour away from San Diego. I went up there for a session, and it was very interesting. And he's kind of been the basis for kind of helping me redevelop and rework my technique. And basically, what I've been working on as of late is just trying to simplify my technical model. His sort of thing for me is it's all like a metaphor for flying a plane, oddly enough. I know hammer throwing, flying a plane, like how is it related? But basically, he said he wants me to help, or he wants to help me kind of reduce turbulence in the throw. So he's took a good look at my videos. He watched me throw in person, and he said that there's just some turbulence, whether it's in the shoulders going up and down or out and back, or just not quite the right direction and stuff like that. He's trying to teach me the proper rotation. And along with that came a lot of different cues that I'm not used to hearing. The first of which was the whole idea of spiraling the hand. So this is the first question that I'm going to answer. Asa, I think you asked this question, or rather you just made a comment. Spiral hands is another concept that I'm interested in. And for me, it all kind of comes back to the winds and the entry. Now let's see here. I have this neat little camera that follows me as I move around. So this is great because I can back up and do some demonstrations, and then you guys will be able to sort of get a better view of what I'm talking about. So spiral hands in the winds and entry is where it's pertinent. And basically, so as I understand it from what Sean has shown me, is that, so what I'm thinking about is, as I'm winding, I'm kind of letting the hands come forward, and it's like this little like spiral motion. Okay, so especially on entry, if you look at, like, I think a Sergey Litvinov, perhaps senior, he kind of comes through, hands kind of tilted, let's say counterclockwise, or clockwise, that would be rather. And then as he comes through entry, you can see he kind of gets this spiral in his shoulders, and his hands turn over and spiral that way. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about in the spiral hands. And as it pertains more to me as a hammer thrower, I'm thinking in the winds, also spiraling my hands to kind of get that motion going. So as the hammer goes forward in the winds, I'm spiraling forward here, I turn back, and then also spiral my hands backwards here, spiral, spiral, come through on entry, and then I'm spiraling this left shoulder down, these hands open, and kind of leaning into that left side a little bit to create a little bit of tension and keep that left shoulder down. So that's kind of the idea of the spiral hands there. Like I said, it's to help kind of set the system a little bit better, remove some turbulence, and then also plane the ball better. Plane the ball better, which, as like once again, is a kind of let's see. Ace asked a question: spiral hands. Do you turn the wrist back in 90 degrees? No, I just kind of try to keep them there, so it kind of sets things up where I'm going like this, and then I just kind of let it go. I think as I turn and step, like yes, perhaps maybe they get back to 90 degrees on the catch, but after entry, I turn and spiral and think about keeping this left shoulder down and going backwards, and then I just kind of let it go. After that, I don't think about it. So really, not too much thought going in after the entry to the whole spiraling hand sort of thing. Yes, keeping the hands turned a little bit to the left does, like I said, give me better tension and connection with this left side. So that's kind of a thing that I think about, but it just kind of, comes and goes after entry. And now we have 10 people in here. So if you guys are new to the chat, drop a comment, say what's up. This is technically live and exclusive for my Patreon community, but I figured, let's give some people, if they're interested, a little view about what goes on behind the scenes in my Patreon. So welcome. If you're here, let me know what's up. And then if you guys would like to join my Patreon, go to patreon.com/hdthrows and sign up there and get a bunch of other exclusive content where you get more reference to all the stuff that I'm talking about. So let me get a sip of water. And then moving on, next technical question. I think it was Andres who asked this. He said, can I find a detailed explanation of what Cosmos lat shoulders and left crank are? They sound very interesting, but would not like to bother which type. Okay, it doesn't matter. But either way, so this also, once again, pertains to a new technical model that I am learning from Sean McGinley. And he is a big fan of, at least in terms of my technique and using others as a model for my technique, he's a big fan of Sergey Litvinov Sr., Primoz Cosmos, and I can't remember the third guy, but he threw really far, and Igor Nikulin. And so he, like I said, a big part of this new technical model is, like I said, reducing turbulence in the throw. And like I said, he as Sean looks at my throw and understanding my throw over the past couple of years, he sees a lot of turbulence, of up and down in the shoulders, of instability, of mostly this left shoulder going up. And the more those shoulders move up, down, back, left, right, it creates an element of instability in the throw and can affect consistency, which, if you guys know me, I'm not the most consistent thrower when it comes to, either training or in competition. I'm really good at throwing like one big mark here or there, but I don't quite have the consistency like across meets or within a meet. So his goal for me is to get a little bit more consistency. And like I said, that is what he calls reducing turbulence in the shoulders. So the whole Primoz Cosmos lat shoulder idea is to help reduce turbulence. And so what I mean by that is, or what he means by that is, rather, if you look at Primoz Cosmos in his winds, he swings forward, and he looks like he's kind of keeping his elbows together. And apparently McGinley had talked to Cosmos. I can't speak for that exactly, but I'm taking his word for it. Because, it's one of those weird things where like a coach can be like, yeah, I talked to this guy, and he told me to do this. And you can get a million different opinions from a million different people, depending on who you talk to, at what point in their career, and what they say on that day, and how you ask the question, and also how you interpret it as well. But basically, if you can see to an extent, it looks like Cosmos, especially as the hammer goes back behind him here, it looks like he's kind of squeezing his elbows together to get a little bit of tension. And then that creates a little bit of tension in the lats and helps keep the shoulders down. So this kind of is like a muscular inhibition sort of thing. So if your traps are really tight and you're having problems with shrugging your shoulders up, an antagonist of the trap, of the trapezius, of the shoulder, is the lat to help pull that down and keep your shoulders down. And this isn't really the best camera view for you to see that, but the lats are pulling down to try to keep the shoulders down to reduce that turbulence within the throw. So this becomes a fixed point rather than another moving point, which adds, like I said, instability into the system. So I use Cosmos as an idea for this. Sean showed me a video, and I was like, it immediately clicked of like keeping the elbows together. And then if you see on the entry, Cosmos comes through in the video. Once again, he kind of gets a little bit of that shoulder rotation, not quite as much as Sergey Litvinov Sr., but you can see he's kind of got his elbows really tight, close together, and he's protracting his shoulders forwards. So not back, but rather protracted forwards. Looks like he's got a little bit of tension down here, and he's got some tension and between the core and the elbows and the lats and all this. And once again, this goes forward to an idea of keeping the throw more in the body. Like I said, the whole idea is to reduce turbulence, and my problem seems to be there's a lot of them down here, and the throw gets out away from the body, which is why I think I fouled at trials last year. The hammer was too far away from me, couldn't feel it. It was kind of in and out. The tension was in and out. So to keep this whole system more consistent, you keep the lats a little bit more engaged, you protract the shoulders forward, or even the serratus. That's the thing I thought about lately, to keep the shoulders down and forwards and protracted, nice and long and stable in the throw in the body. That way the hips can do all the turning rather than getting this separation and disconnection with the shoulders. So Dawson, what's up, G? Congrats on winning the I believe it was the WIAC, correct? Happy to see you here. There's a Patreon live Q&A, so if you're not signed up for my Patreon, you should go do that. Free content for you guys right now. But yeah, and then so outside of those two things to start off with, the spiral hands and the Cosmos Latin shoulders, getting the throw kind of more in the body. That's kind of, like I said, just kind of that's the first part of stabilizing my technique that I've been learning over the past couple months. And then the next part of that is learning the proper rotation. And this is a little bit less easy for me to explain because it's a very conceptual idea and I'm not exactly even sure I 100% understand it. I'm just going with it, and it seems to be working very well. To start the throw, like I said, stable, winds and entry, Cosmos, Latin shoulders, keeping tension, keeping the throw in the body, and then spiraling the hands through on entry. The second part of that, outside of the winds and getting that more stable, is the left side kind of crank, if you will. And that's the idea of turning the left side backwards as the hammer goes through zero. So this would be me keeping the left side where it is, and this would be me cranking the left side backwards. Left shoulder, left hip, left foot, whatever you want to talk about. The idea is that that helps set the rotation better. I kind of think of it as like a bullwhip. I'm not sure this analogy 100% makes sense, but in my brain it does a little bit, where your body and the hammer create a system. And a lot of people think right-sided with that system. They think, okay, I'm going to push the hammer. I'm going to work the right leg. I'm going to work the right hip. That's what I used to think about personally. I used to think about all those things, honestly. But then I realized that by pushing the hammer ahead, it creates a certain sense of disconnection away. If you push too far ahead, the hammer gets ahead of you and you lose tension. And this happens just kind of throughout the throw if you're not 100% consistent like I was, where like sometimes I'd get it right, but a lot of times I might not. And then, hi, Andres. Yes. What about the crank left hip idea? I'm actually elaborating on that right now. I'm not sure how early you joined. Yeah, so I'm explaining that the idea of cranking the left shoulder backwards through zero or the left hip backwards through zero is kind of like the start of a bullwhip. So if you know anything about throwing a whip or cracking a whip, you go forwards and you have to stop that motion for the rest of the system to accelerate and for you actually to crack the whip. And I guess in my mind, the left hip crank is essentially like your hand being the end of that bullwhip through the system. Whereas your right hand, I imagine a two-handed bullwhip, if you will. If you went to go do it together and you only pushed this side, but you didn't pull this side, if you push the right hand but didn't pull the left side, that bullwhip isn't going to quite crack as strong or as it, I guess, as it needs to. I suppose I'm not a bullwhip extraordinaire, if you will. But basically, if you take the left side, you pull the bullwhip. If the right side, you push the bullwhip. You do both at once, and then you pull through and stop. The bullwhip's going to crack through, and it's going to be a nice, super strong, kind of better directed sort of thing. So in my mind, I think that the left hip, the left side, the left shoulders is the start of the system. And if you let the ball get ahead of the start of the system, you're going to lose tension. So you need to crank that left side back to set the direction, and then also to keep yourself connected with the hammer. You need to keep some tension through that left side, in my opinion. It's not like 100% gospel. This is just how it's worked for me. But yeah, so the idea of cranking the left hip one more time to explain for Andres, because he's just perhaps getting in here, and let's see if we can get this camera to move down. Maybe not. We'll see. I'm just going to use my hand to adjust it. Yeah, cool. Yes, Andres says he gets it. But yeah, so basically to demonstrate what the left hip crank is basically in the winds, okay, you're thinking about turning this left hip back. And this is the craziest thing that I discovered over the past month or so, is that a lot of people talk about turning the right hip to work the hammer, or turning the right hip to do anything rotational power-wise. If you're swinging the baseball bat, you turn the right hip. If you're swinging a golf club, you turn the right hip. And then I got on this crazy idea of cranking the left hip, and then I realized, oh, wow, okay, so if I think about turning the right hip, it looks like that. Now, if I think about pulling this left hip backwards, guess what it looks like? The same thing, except something's leading the system versus behind the system, okay? Leading, right hip, or left hip. You really can't tell the difference. So it's this weird thing where I'm like, oh man, I can do exactly what I want to do in the throw, but it's much more simple, and it's much more replicable, much more reliable, much more consistent. So that left hip crank is kind of what I'm thinking about in each double support, kind of turning backwards and falling backwards into, yes, Asa, pushing a string versus pulling a string idea. Exactly. It makes sense in my brain. And yes, I do think about leading with the left, but that is kind of a tough thing to say, like, yes, 100%. I do think about using the left side to be a little bit more ahead to keep tension. I think, once again, it goes back to, if the hammer gets too far ahead, you lose tension with it. So people say, like, oh, push the ball. It gets ahead of you, you're going to lose tension. I think you need to be connected with it. You need to be even with it. You need to be balanced with it, which means the hammer's going left, the left side's also turning left. The hammer's going left, the right side's also going left. Derek Bennett, howdy from Oregon. Welcome. Join us. Ask any questions if you have any. We're talking about technique right now. But yeah, so basically, I do think about leading with the left a little bit, but there's a difference between pulling through the throw, like cranking that left side, and then dragging. I think there's obviously like an egregious difference between, like, all right, I'm pulling through the throw and I'm like maybe 5% ahead of it, versus I'm dragging through the throw and my left arm is hard across my body. And there's this drastic separation between the upper body and the lower body and the hammer. And does it reduce the radius? Tough to say. I don't know the biomechanics behind it. This is just a thing that I've felt. And it does, like I said, when the goal is to be more stable and consistent, having a longer radius, like, yes, it does maximize the distance on the throw. But if it leads to instability, like, maybe I'd give up 5% radius for give a 5% radius for maybe a 10% increase in consistency, which would ultimately end up in better distance, perhaps. And yeah, Andre said, my coach always told me to avoid pulling the pivoting hip. Yeah, I mean, that's just that's my personal kind of take on it. Like, I'm not saying your coach is wrong. I'm just saying this is how I've come to learn it, and I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, pulling the pivoting hip, like I said, I think both sides of the body need to turn together. So, like, if you're not turning or pivoting with this left hip, it's not moving, which means the whole system is going to kind of have this weird, like, in and out sort of disconnection sort of thing. It needs to be the whole body turning together, the feet, the knees, the hips, the upper body, the hammer, all together, instead of, like, imagine if you go to turn like this, like I said, it's creating a little bit of disconnection. And then it's up to your left side to your left side's going to pull to create tension one way or another, if you do it consciously, or if you lose tension, your left side is going to pull as a reaction to keep tension with the hammer and keep the throw going on. So it's kind of a tough thing to reconcile. It's a weird idea. I know a lot of people might not be hip to it. I'm super new to it, so I'm not going to say it's the best way to go about things, but it's just what I've been working on lately. Uberboat 45 asks, how do you release the hammer? Do you pull with the back or push up with the legs? Both. If I'm doing a clean or snatch, am I just pulling with the back or am I just pushing with the legs? I want to do both, right? Yeah. Haley says hello from Texas. Hello, Haley. We got 14 people in the chat, bro. Let's go. Yeah, once again, for the people that are new here, this is a Patreon Q&A. If you sign up for my Patreon, you get a bunch of exclusive content. Just $10 a month. You get to see all my training logs and technical ideas and training recaps and throwing recaps and every single throw I take every single day. Johannes Nielsen asked, do you have any tips for feeling the tension in the wire consistently? And yes, that is just being relaxed. If you create tension, let's say if your arms aren't fully extended and out like this, if your biceps and forearms and triceps and shoulders are tight, you're creating an artificial tension through the system of the radius being like your body out to the hammer. You're creating this artificial tension, so you're not going to feel the tension from the hammer. So the only way to feel tension from the hammer is to relax and give into it a little bit. And then you want to hold steady with the torso and the back and the core. You leave the upper body long and relaxed a little bit. And then that will help you feel more consistent tension from the hammer. Asa asked, but still first with legs followed by back pull. I wouldn't get that. That's kind of like splitting hairs, if you ask me, when it comes to the finish. Like when you're throwing 70, 75, even when you're throwing, let's say 60 meters, 50 meters, I don't think a lot of people have the time to think about, all right, I'm going to push with the legs here and then pull the back there in the finish. It's just one movement. You don't want to think about it like that. It should be an almost automatic sort of thing. It should be natural. Like I said, if you do a clean or a snatch, perhaps like the more you think about it, the kind of less effective or less efficient you're going to be in the movement. So best not to think about it too much. So Derek said, my coach always said the finish or release was like a reverse dunk. Yeah, I think Deanna Price mentioned that once to me or to somebody. And that's a thing that I've never thought about. I've tried it before. It doesn't really work for me personally. I think of more of like a backhanded finish, like out into the sector, and I let go because I want to throw out. I don't want to throw up. That's just me though. But I've known quite a few people who do think about like hands up in the air like that, and for a nice steady sticky finish. Joe the Thrower, more Texas fam here. Welcome, brother. I love that Texas barbecue. Uberboat says, do you consciously turn on the side of the left foot? And that sort of, yeah. At this point, it's turning on my feet is automatic. I don't really think about anything specifically. Sometimes I'll think about like maybe turning on the inside of the foot on the toe turn just a little bit, but like outside of that, I'm not thinking about what my feet are doing. Once again, in terms of grouping the whole movement pattern together, at this point in my career, it is an automatic thing. Like I just, you turn the way you turn. Some people turn on the inside of their foot, toe to inside of the heel, and then outside of the foot. Some people turn, I don't even know how, just different ways. Once again, you don't want to like kind of miss the forest for the trees here. And it's important to realize that, you don't want to think too much about technique when you're doing technique. You kind of just need to let your body do some things. Yes, it's important. Like if there's some big glaring issues with your feet, like let's say if your left foot comes off the ground every turn, or your right foot doesn't turn at all, that's some big glaring things that need to be worked on. But for me personally, I don't think about turning on the left side of the foot. It just happens. So moving on from technique, now that we're about 30 minutes into it, we'll spend the last 30 minutes talking about training. And there's quite a few questions here. A lot from Asa, which I appreciate. You asked some very good questions. So I want to just run through as many of these as possible in the last 30 minutes. Once again, if you guys are just joining in, welcome to my Patreon live Q&A. Sign up for my Patreon where you get exclusive content. throwing programs, training programs, recaps. You get to talk to me kind of one-on-one. You ask me a question, I'm going to answer it in depth and detail because I want to share the info with you guys. So, yeah, moving on to training questions for these last 30 minutes. I'm going to try to go through the quick ones as fast as possible. When you were throwing in college, how often did you measure training throws? In college, I did a Bondarchuk style system. I still kind of do. I wouldn't say it's 100% Bondarchuk. It's Bondarchuk influence. It's kind of like a Frankenstein program of all the things I've put together or have done over the years. And that does involve measuring throws very frequently, just to get an indicator of like bodily state and how I performed on the day, to measure trends and track my body and nervous system, if you will. So nowadays, I really only measure if I'm throwing far. At this point, if there's a line on the field, like let's say so yesterday I set a season best with a 9K, 64 meters. If I've seen that throw go farther than any other throw I've taken so far, I'm going to go put a cone on it. Okay. But then let's say like yesterday, I did not throw very far. I threw like 60 meters. I know where the hammers are going if they're landing between 58, 60, 62 meters, because if there's a line out on the field, well, I'm not going to measure those ones. But I still like to have an idea of where my hammers are going in terms of tracking data, like I said, to measure the trends of my body. So it's not, I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. I do get caught up in distances sometimes, and part of the bane of my existence is shutting that off and just focusing on technique in the process and executing my technique. So keep that in mind. So that's a quick one. Yes, I've measured throws in college. I probably measured maybe a few times a week, once again, just depending on how I was throwing on the day. And then hello to Haley and Athletics Villager. I'll get to your questions in a little bit, perhaps. I'm trying to get through some of these training questions that I've already gotten so far. And then hello to my brother, Stephen Donnelly. Welcome. Yes. Okay. Let's see what else. How many releases did you take in a typical practice back when you were also throwing shot and discus? For me, my throwing volume has always been pretty much around 15 to 30 throws a session, whether that be when I was throwing shot and discus and hammer, or just hammer or hammer and weight. Usually I'm going to split up those. Well, I'd say even as low as 12 to 30 throws. For example, back when I was throwing shot and discus, it would be 8 to 10 throws with shot, 8 to 10 throws with hammer. That would be a session. I would do that 5 times a week, repeat it for a few weeks. And that was kind of it. And then discus was a thing that I didn't really even train technically. I practiced discus. I think there's a differentiation between training and practicing. Training is like all of your stuff is focused on the single intent of making this one thing better. Practicing is like, all right, I'm just going to go take some throws just to get a feel for it, So I really only trained shot put and hammer when I was back in college. Early on, I only practiced discus. I would go throw it maybe once or twice a week for like 3 to 5 throws. That was it. But general releases for me over the course of a training session early on in my career, even now, is 12 to 30 throws. And I'd say I rarely go over 20, honestly. Asa asked a good question regarding my training log, which, as I said, is available over on Patreon. You get to see my daily training log updates. And a thing that I've been tracking this year that is new is consistency. So Asa asked, like, how do I work with this consistency metric? And the way that works for me is, like I said, my goal is to be more consistent this year. So the saying that comes to mind is what gets measured gets managed. So if you're not like, if your goal is to improve consistency, but you're not tracking a objective measure of consistency, then how are you going to know if you're actually getting more consistent? And you're just going to probably spin your wheels. Like, hey, you can be like, I think this practice felt more consistent. But if you don't actually go back and be like, all right, I saved 10 of 12 throws and they were all at respectable distances, like that's a measure of consistency for me. So the way my consistency measure works is I take a certain number of throws in a practice, let's say 16 throws, like I'm doing right now. And then when I do and edit my training recaps, I go back and look at like, all right, was this a good throw? Did I stay in the ring? Did it land in the sector? Is it, basically in my mind, it's, would I mark this throw in a competition? If I do a 3-turn and dump, or if I throw it out of the sector, if I foot foul, that doesn't count as a consistency metric, if you will. And interestingly enough, since I've started tracking consistency and as I've gotten better with my new technical model, consistency has improved because I've been tracking and I have an idea of like, okay, if I, only have 3 marked throws in a 15 throw session, that's not very good. That's what, 20% consistency. Whereas now it's been upwards of 50, 60, 70%, which for training, especially when I'm in a hard training block, is relatively good. Um, so that's the consistency metric explained. I think that was an interesting question that I wanted to answer. Let's take a look at the chat here for a second. Diet plan for thrower. Athletics Villager asked, use code Sean at RP Strength. Use the RP Diet app. That's all it takes. It's that easy. You follow it. You can bulk, you can cut. It simplifies it. It's like $10 a month. Totally worth it. Uberboat asks, how long? What are your warm-up throws for a session? General warm-up for a session is probably 15 minutes long. Basic stuff. This is stuff that you once again get to see on my Patreon. I explain it in my Program 6 overview and basic stuff, core activation, mobility, a little bit of stuff like that. Maybe takes 10, 15 minutes. And then in terms of specific warm-up for throwing is maybe another 10, 15 minutes, winds, turns, basic stuff like that. Nothing crazy. Andres asked, why don't you mix various hammer weights and lengths in the same day or the same week? Is it the most effective approach to use only one hammer size per day? And that is a good question. That's another thing that was asked to me on Patreon. And yeah, basically, I don't use different weights and different hammers and different lengths because each hammer weight, each hammer length, each hammer weight and length, whatever, provides its own variable. And I think about training as a science experiment, the scientific method. If you're changing a bunch of variables all the time, you don't actually know what you're adapting to or if you're even going to adapt to it as effectively as you could. So I've learned over the years personally that by throwing just one hammer or maybe 2 hammers or keeping the same program for 3 to 4 weeks, my body gets a more complete adaptation and I'm able to track the ups and downs of my body and how things kind of flow. And when it comes to harder training cycles or harder training periods. So for me, it's a very interesting thing to do. I know a lot of people, they might change hammers every session. They might throw multiple hammers in one session, and that's cool. That's their system. I have my system. I've tried throwing multiple hammer weights in the past in the same session. Sometimes it goes well. I can usually do about maybe 2. I think I've done 3 before. But if I switch too much day to day, like let's say if I start out like day 1 is 10K and 8K, if day 2 is 7K and 6K, and day 3 is like a 9K and an 8K or something like that sort of variation for me doesn't work very well. If anything, it's kind of detrimental to adaptation. If you ask me, there's too many variables at play. And it's like, what am I actually trying to adapt to? Am I trying to learn strength? Am I trying to learn, stability? Am I trying to learn relaxation? Am I trying to learn rhythm? How do I learn rhythm with 10 different balls in the same week? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And so that's just kind of my system. Maybe it's oversimplified, but it's worked for me so far. And that's pretty much what I've done for almost my entire career. So yeah, that's kind of why I only stick to one hammer weight per session per week. Once again, you would know if you signed up for my Patreon. Hey. Yes. So hello, Mandeep Kaur. Spamming the chat comments. Joseph Diademo asked, do you hold the hammer in the fingertips or the knuckles? If you look at the calluses on my fingertips, I technically hold it like right there, but it puts pressure up on my fingertips. So kind of combo of both. Ooh, Panda's Kitchen. What's up, G? If I were a Crayola color, what would I be? Macaroni and cheese yellow. Isn't that one? I don't know. Yes. Love you too, Brian. I appreciate you. I miss you. What do I think about when I throw? Maybe the technical cue that I'm thinking about that day. Maybe I'm just thinking about experiencing the throw. Maybe I'm not thinking about anything. In my best throws, I honestly black out and I don't think about anything. And I start the throw, I end the throw, and then I come to about a few seconds later. I'm like, wow, I just did that. It felt really good. I'm not thinking, So that's what I said 6 years ago. No way, dude. I guess I'm consistent. Do I hold the weight by the top or bottom corner? I don't. I hold by the bottom. That's just personal preference. I don't think it actually makes a difference. Okay, so moving on back to training questions. Now that we're off the chat for a second, get some more water. 20 minutes left. Okay. Let's see here. Let's do some weight room stuff, eh? Yeah. So Asa asked, do you do much absolute strength training during your off season, or do you focus on building power most of the year? It's a good question. I think I have a pretty balanced system of doing both strength training and kind of building power throughout the year. Like, yes, during the fall, I focused a little bit more on doing triphasic training, which is more of an absolute strength training sort of thing. But that sets a good base foundation for me to go build power from there, learning how to control heavy weights and have good technique and posture in the weight room. And then even now, like I'm in a strength block, but I'm still technically building power because I don't do exclusively strength workouts or exclusively power workouts. I do a kind of concurrent sort of training periodization. So a decent mix of strength and power. Going back to the chat for a second, Josh, is it normal for your fingers to hurt with the pressure of the weight? Yes, 100%. Like I said, if you can see the calluses on my fingers, those hurt sometimes. I'd say maybe about 20, 25% of the time. It's a good feedback, though. If your fingers hurt a lot all the time, that means you're probably pulling the weight too much. And that is not a good thing. Asa asked, could you re-explain your tactic with Olympic lifts and the progression throughout the year? The difference is kind of between now and what I'll do later in the year. So right now, the way my Olympic lifts are kind of set up, Asa, are I'm thinking a little bit more generally. So I'm thinking larger movement patterns, less sport specific movement patterns. So like a clean from the floor or a full back squat, ass to grass is not 100% sport specific. And that's with the intentions of I want to build general whole body strength in an effort to kind of give me something to work off of later in the year, give me a foundation to work off of, I suppose, instead of just consistently doing kind of sport-specific stuff all year round and kind of getting tired of that. I like the variation. Once again, when it comes to the scientific method of my training, if I'm always doing the same thing all the time, my body kind of gets stale from that. It needs a new variable to adapt to. So that that change in exercise variation of like doing a general, like a full, from the floor clean high pull. If I switch that to a clean high pull from the hang, that's a different variable that my body's going to have to adapt to, and it gives me something else to work off of moving forwards. So yeah, basically, as the year is going on, my Olympic lifting is going to get shorter range of motion. So I started out in the fall doing full snatch high pulls. So that's technically shorter range of motion, but it's heavier because, like I said, I'm building general strength. And so I pull from the floor, snatch high pull, clean high pull, same thing. And then for back squats and front squats, I'm doing full range of motion there. Then as I move on through the year, like I said, I'm going to go to like right now I'm doing a hip snatch, which is one of my favorite things that I've been doing. A little lighter load, higher velocity, better for building power and speed, a little bit more reactive, a little bit more sport specific. Then like the next variation of that would be like a close grip hang snatch. So it's a little bit lighter, a little bit more reactive, a little bit more sport specific. And then same thing for cleans. I'm going to go from a full hang clean from the floor to a hang clean from, or hang power clean from the hang, of course. That's what I'm saying. And then the final kind of iteration of that would be like a hang clean from a box, which is a kind of, I would consider that like a general specific exercise, which is in my brain, it makes sense. But to people out there, you might be like, you're insane. And that's fine. But it's a good thing that helps me feel certain things that I want to feel in the throw. So that's kind of the progression throughout the year. It's going to be long range of motion, heavy load to shorter range of motion, lighter load, typically, I'd say. And then Andre says, what do you think have been the most helpful changes in you planning to break through your plateaus and progression? And that is a good question. My goal is to just slow things down, make small changes add them up over time rather than trying to make one big change at a time. So, like, for example, I'm building up in volume in throws per session, or I should say per week, by adding 1 or 2 throws a session. Over time, that's a very small, minuscule change. But then over time, if I do that every single week for 40 weeks and I add 2 throws a session, that's 10 throws a week. I've just added 400 total throws per week or something like that. I don't know what the math I'm doing in my head, but basically, to break through plateaus in my progression, I'm just trying to make smaller progressions. That's all it really is. Trying to slow things down a little bit and not make, because I think sometimes those big jumps can really affect how your body reacts, and it can be too much at times. If you make a big jump in, let's say, a certain variable in training, whether it's intensity or load or volume or what hammer you're throwing or how many throws you're doing, that can have a negative effect on the body. And then, yes, Asa, during the peak, I do more snatches from the hip. I'll do more hang reactive sort of stuff. Joseph asks, how can you handle training between shot, disc, and hammer in high school? Like I said, go out and just get some throws, dude. As a high schooler, you should have plenty of, kind of work capacity. You're young. You should have a lot of energy. So go take 10, 15 throws of shot and disc. Go take 10, 15 throws of disc of hammer, and just vary day to day, Or you can sign up for coaching via my website, gripandrip.co. I can write a training program for you or for one of your athletes if you need. And then Babette Vendeput asks, do you use motion capture devices during practice? I just film on a GoPro. That's it. I like to film my throws just because I'm a visual learner. I'm a kinesthetic learner. I like to pair the two together. And then also I get to make some sweet training recaps to post over on Patreon so you guys can see every single throw that I take. Yes, close grip snatches are good. That's a very Bondarchuk type lift, I think, if you ask me. And then, are your goals at this point in your career about throwing as far as possible or winning comps medal? I just want to enjoy life at this point, man. I just want to have fun. I want to enjoy the process. I want to enjoy training. I want to enjoy competing. I want to go enjoy traveling. I want to go meet cool people and do cool things. And of course, I want to throw far and win medals and make teams and win competitions and stuff like that. But honestly, I just want to enjoy doing it because at the end of the day, you can win an Olympic medal, but if you're not happy with your life in general, that Olympic medal isn't going to give you happiness. So I'm not really too worried about that stuff. I just want to enjoy the process. Yes, and I like Ace's advice. Go to sleep, get some rest. That's the best advice for your competition tomorrow. And will hammer throw ever make it into the Diamond League? Unfortunately, probably not, because I think there's some secret conspiracy. But if maybe once I'm retired, I can infiltrate the IAAF or the World Athletics and finagle us in there and pull some like Wendy Bird level shit on some people, at World Athletics to get them to do what needs to be done. Okay, moving back to training questions. So yes, I explained, the different range of motion doing Olympic lifts. Like I said, shorter range of motion is a little bit more for power or speed. That's kind of how I work through the year, personally. And then also, it is easier to understand for squats that doing full squats during peak is not that transferable to the movement in the hammer throw, and at that time, quarter squats are more to the point. And yes, I kind of agree with that. I think I like to do a full range of motion squat at all times of the year because I think it's a beneficial sort of mobility and stability sort of thing. Like early on in my college career, I didn't do any deep squats and I had a lot of adductor issues. And then after doing full range of motion squats, all of a sudden my adductors were strong enough and then I could throw better because I was healthier. So it's kind of like a trade-off of like, yes, it's maybe not the most sport specific thing, but once again, if it can help you complete your sport specific training better, then maybe it's a useful thing to include. And I think this year I'm playing around with the idea of like maybe doing one heavy set of full range of motion squats or doing full range of motion squats warming up, and then going to a quarter squat to be a little bit more sport specific later on. Typically doing a quarter squat or a one leg split squat or something like that is a little bit more specific, but it's kind of comes down to the athlete and what they like and how they feel and all that stuff. Yes, Josh Beiswinger asked, what role do you think special strength plays for collegiate throwers? And I think it's the same as it does for every other thrower, professional, beginner, it doesn't matter. Special strength is typically going to be good. Specificity and training is good. Um, so, like, I mean, I did a lot of special strength in college, whether it be heavy wind and releases, heavy one turns or two turns, heavy shot finishes, heavy disc finishes, um, light disc finishes, light shot finishes, shot swings, dumbbell throws, all different sorts of things. Special strength is important. And then, especially in the weight room, plate twists, rotational exercises in the weight room are going to be very important. And I think that's kind of what makes me a good thrower compared to others is like I don't have the best squat or deadlift or clean or snatch or bench press, but I think I had a relatively strong and reactive core because I did a lot of plate twists and V sit ups and like hanging leg raises and side bends and all that stuff. So that stuff I think is very important, and that's where I think I can't speak for everybody. It seems like that's where a lot of people are missing. Uh, that key aspect of training. It's a thing that people can do to really take their game to the next level if they aren't already doing something. And even then, if you are doing it, if you don't have intention of like, all right, because some people think like, oh, doing heavy winds with like 100 kilos worth of or 100 pounds worth of weight is a good thing, but like that's not very sport specific. If you ask me, it's too slow. Your body's going to be moving all around. You're not going to be stable like you need to be in a throw. So there needs to be a little bit of intention and specificity behind the special strength stuff that you're doing. He says during doing squats though, what about one leg squats during peak? It depends what kind of one leg squats. Like a step up, I think is great. I think dumbbell rear foot elevated split squat is maybe a little too slow, but step ups would be great for sure. A pistol squat might be okay, but too full range of motion. Once again, I think it comes back to the range of motion rather than how many legs are on the ground. Or like a split squat, a quarter split squat, a half split squat with a barbell or dumbbells or stuff like that. The split stance is a little bit more sport specific, sure, but I don't think it has a huge difference personally. Which weight room exercise do you find is the most helpful for you? I think a heavy Olympic lift, not heavy, but like a 70 to 80% Olympic lift is kind of the best thing for me. Like there's a noticeable difference of like one day I go in, I'll throw, I won't have any lifting done the day before. The next day or like that day I throw, I'm gonna go into the gym later. I'm gonna do, maybe like a 3x3 or 4x2 on snatch at like 75 to 80%. And then if I go and throw the next day, it feels like my body's like just on another level. I have a different level of snappiness, and it's kind of like gets my new nervous system really firing. So that's probably, I think, the most helpful weight room exercise for me. Outside of that, I think squats are necessary. Like you got to have strong legs, 100%. Which weight room exercises would you say are most overrated if comparing to other colleagues of yours? I don't know. I think based on from what I've seen, a lot of the other people that I'm competing against have pretty sound systems of training. They do Olympic lifts, they do snatches, they do plate twists, they do accessory stuff to help support the bigger muscles and stuff like that. I don't think there's anything that's entirely overrated. Based on personal experience this past year, I did a cycle of deadlifts for the first time in like 6 years. And I think that was useless. If you ask me, like I thought it was going to be good for building back strength, but if anything, it just taught me to use my erectors more as opposed to use my hips more. So like, I felt like I didn't have a strong kind of triple extension doing snatches and cleans for a while. So I don't think deadlifts are kind of the best, but that's just me personally. And then Kozak Up said he did 3 fingers this morning. It was a bad idea. Yeah, it's not for everybody. Try it out. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Which weight room exercises would you say? Oh, I already asked that one. Hang clean, hang snatch. Yeah, hang clean, hang snatch. I think any sort of Olympic lift is going to be helpful for me. Whether it's from the hang, whether it's from the floor, anything that gets that powerful triple extension is going to be good for me. And not to say deadlifts are a no-no exactly, but like I said, for me personally, I don't find them useful. I decided to play around with them and, do it for the first time because I like deadlifting. I liked deadlifting when I was younger in high school and stuff like that. So I thought it would be a fun thing to try out. And ultimately, it seemed to be a waste of time. I didn't really build that much strength comparable to if I was just doing like a clean high pull or snatch high pull or something. Like I said, it just kind of like everything kind of taught my body not to use my hips on the extension or the contact of an Olympic lift. So back to these training questions from Patreon. I probably got about 10 left and we only have a few minutes left. So I'm going to try to run through these as quick as possible. How much testing do you incorporate in your programs? And that's not very much, to be fair. Like I'll do testing and throwing maybe once every 3 weeks or so, depending on how I'm feeling. In terms of general testing, I don't really do any vertical or horizontal jump tests. I don't do any like overhead or backward shot tosses. And I'll do the occasional weight room testing just to get an idea of what my one rep maxes are. So that way I can use that for the next training cycle to make things a little bit more specific. But yeah, I don't do much testing. I did something that I wanted to try this year, but just I couldn't find a time to fit it in because it's like it adds intensity to training when I necessarily don't need intensity. I need more volume and consistency. So to test things at this point, like it'd be cool to be like, all right, when I'm throwing 80 meters, like I have this vertical jump and I have this overhead backwards shot toss and I have this, broad jump versus 75 versus 70 meters. So it'd be a cool thing to try out, but I don't think it really kind of fits my training system right now because I know I'm going to keep progressing if I do things appropriately. So quite a lot of shoulder work in my strength program. This is kind of personal preference. I'd say I do see a good bit of other hammer throwers doing shoulder work, whether it be lateral raises or front raises or external rotator cuff work. It's just, I think it's good. I've almost dislocated my shoulder a few times from throwing hammers. So I think it adds some stability and integrity to the whole system. And then, like I said, one of my technical goals for this year is to get a little bit more lat tension. So I'm just trying to stabilize that shoulder a little bit and make sure everything's healthy, because otherwise, if I don't do those things, my body can get pretty achy and not feel very good. How do you measure explosiveness improvements? Yeah, PBs and throwing, 100%. Or I can feel it in the weight room. For example, if I go in and I do my working sets at 80% on snatch, and let's say it's 80 kilos, I go in 1 week, I do 80 kilos and it feels okay. Nothing crazy. If I go in the next week, I do 80 kilos again, or I do 85 kilos even, and it feels better than I did the first week, that's an improvement of explosiveness, is it not? But mostly, yes. PBs and throwing. That's how I test my general state of and how I'm going or how I'm trending and progressing throughout the season. Haley Winterx says mental training. I saw you asked that earlier and I glazed over it. I'm sorry, but mental training. I meditate. I journal. I work with a sports psychologist. I have a number of things I do to try to get the mental training in. Of course, you got to show up every day and be disciplined, and it's a muscle that needs to be trained. But if you have trouble, mental training is a very general question. It's like, are you dealing with anxiety? Are you dealing with over arousal? Are you dealing with who knows what? So it kind of depends on the situation. But for me, yes, I do a lot of mental training. Like I said, journaling. I don't do visualization. It doesn't really work for me personally. I like to feel the throw rather than see it. So am I throwing heavies for the next few cycles? Yes, I'm on the 9K right now. I'm going to 10K next cycle and then back down 9K, 8K, and then getting into comp season into May. Let's see what else. I think that might wrap it up. Yeah. I'm not sure. And for lifting, I use a 3-week training cycle. So I'll do like a 2.5 week loading and a half week deload. And I actually kind of pair those two together, or pair 2 cycles together to come out with a full 6-week training cycle. That's just my personal preference once again. And then let's see. And then volumes in terms of throwing, like I said, is kind of on the low side, I think, relative to a lot of other professional hammer throwers. Like I know some people take 30 throws every single day. Some people take 30 to 40 throws a couple times a week. So it comes out to 120, 150 throws per week. And I'm right now, I think at maybe like 80 or 90. And that's just personally how I adapt. Like I said, I throw 5 days a week versus I think more frequency is better, in my opinion. So I'd rather have 5 quality sessions than 3 or 5 quality sessions where I am so fatigued that I can't even throw. And I find that when my throwing volume does get too high, my back can get kind of iffy. So I don't want to push that too much. I'm trying to find the balance, the sweet spot, if you will. And that's kind of all the questions for Patreon. I'll go back through and answer the chat questions really quickly. And then we're going to wrap this thing up, man. Shout out to the Three Finger Gang. Welcome. I volunteer a tribute. Yes. And then Joseph said towards the end of the indoor season, I was throwing consistent 38 plus pretty easily for the first week leading up to the meet, and then 35 in the meet. How do you deal with adversity in all events? You deal with adversity in all events. You're going to show up every single day. You're going to do the thing. You're going to go throw in the rain. You're going to go train in the rain. You're going to go train when you're tired. You're going to go train when it's cold. That's how you deal with adversity in all events. And the more you get yourself uncomfortable with those scenarios, you're going to be able to experience those scenarios in competition and be like, all right, good. I got this. I've done this before. You build that confidence. There's a certain stoicism is a good thing to look into, a stoic philosophy. You say good, you smile, and you go do the thing anyways. Doesn't matter what the situation is. It's kind of oversimplified, but it's that easy. It's not actually that easy, but it's that simple to say. And then congrats, Martavius Henderson. First time throwing weight. Good job. Way to get on the horse, I suppose. And then Asa asks, when is the first big competition? I think my season opener is going to be the weekend of April 1st. So just about a month away. First big competition won't be until later April. So that's just the season opener to get my feet wet. And then later in the season, I'm going to get back to it. So that's pretty much it, man. I'm tired. I got a busy day of work to do. But thank you everybody for tuning in. To all 15 people still here, I appreciate you. Like I said, this is supposed to be an exclusive thing just for my Patreon, but I just want people to join in and chat and get things going. I want to build a little bit of community and talk hammer and influence people to help them achieve their goals, I guess. That's why I do this stuff. Like I said, go check out my Patreon. A lot of exclusive content there, throwing recaps, training logs, program overview, breakdowns, all that stuff, in-depth stuff. You can chat with me one-on-one, ask me questions, and you have priority over everybody else out there in the world because you're a special member of my exclusive Patreon community. It's only $10 to sign up, which is like chump change, man. If you go to Chipotle and get a burrito, you can sign up for my Patreon. That's my go-to metric of like, is it worth it? Is it one burrito? Okay, I can skip out on a burrito this month to go learn a bunch of information that's going to help me achieve my goals. So, yes, that's it. Thank you for watching, everybody. I appreciate you. Have a great Sunday. Have a great rest of your week. If you have any questions about anything, hit me up on the Instagram. Maybe drop a comment down below. Like I said, but Patreon is the best place to contact me, where you get priority over everyone else. I have notifications turned off on my phone, except for Patreon. They're still on because I love you guys. I care about you. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Until next time, Sean Don. Peace and out.